Imagine a company so powerful it didn't just have customers, it had an army.
A private military twice the size of the British Empire's own forces. Long before Apple, Google, or Amazon, there was the East India Company. In today's money, it was worth nearly $8 trillion. It didn't just trade silk and spices.
It conquered nations, printed its own currency, and sparked revolutions. But how did a small group of London merchants convince a queen to give them a monopoly over half the world?
Today, we are opening the wealth vault to reveal the blueprint.
Our story begins on December 31st, 1600.
Queen Elizabeth I signs a royal charter giving 218 merchants a total monopoly on trade in the East Indies.
At the time, England was a small island with big dreams. They weren't looking to conquer land, they were looking for profit. Specifically, they wanted black pepper, cloves, and nutmeg.
In the 17th century, these spices were as valuable as oil is today. The problem? The Portuguese and the Dutch already controlled the routes. To compete, the East India Company had to become more than a trading firm. It had to become a naval power. They raised capital from private investors, creating the world's first joint stock company. This was the birth of the modern corporation, a system where many people could share the risk and the rewards of a high-stakes global gamble. When the British first arrived in India, they weren't the masters, they were the beggars.
India was ruled by the Mughal Empire, the wealthiest and most sophisticated power on earth. The Mughals produced 25% of the world's GDP.
By comparison, England produced less than 3%.
The first British envoys had to bow before Emperor Jahangir, begging for the right to build a single warehouse.
But the company was patient. They didn't use force yet. They used soft power. They offered the Mughals rare European goods and naval protection against pirates.
They secured small trading posts in Surat and Madras.
This was the Trojan horse strategy. By embedding themselves into the local economy as helpful traders, they slowly built the infrastructure they would later use to take over the entire subcontinent.
As the 1700s progressed, the company realized that spices weren't the only goldmine.
They discovered tea in China, but there was a problem. The Chinese emperor only accepted silver in exchange for tea. The British were running out of silver fast.
To fix this trade deficit, the company turned to one of the darkest business models in history: opium. They grew the drug in India and smuggled it into China, creating millions of addicts to ensure they had a constant flow of silver coming back.
This triangular trade between Britain, India, and China turned the East India Company into a global drug cartel. This period shows a brutal lesson in wealth. If the market doesn't exist, the powerful will sometimes create one no matter the human cost.
By the mid-1700s, the company's trading posts needed protection.
What started as a few security guards evolved into a massive private army of sepoys, local Indian soldiers trained in European tactics.
By 1750, the company realized that political instability in India was an opportunity.
If they could control the land, they could collect the taxes.
They weren't just merchants anymore.
They were a state in the disguise of a merchant.
Their army eventually grew to 260,000 men. To put that in perspective, the official British army back in London only had 100,000.
This is the first time in history a private board of directors in a London office had more firepower than most world governments.
Leverage had shifted from the boardroom to the battlefield. The turning point came in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey. A young company clerk named Robert Clive led 3,000 men against an army of 50,000.
On paper, it was suicide.
But Clive didn't win with bullets. He won with a bribe. He secretly paid of the enemy's top general, Mir Jafar, promising him the throne if he stayed out of the fight.
The general agreed. When the battle started, half the Indian army simply didn't move.
Clive won the battle in hours. In return, the company was granted the Diwani, the right to collect taxes from the richest province in India, Bengal. Overnight, the East India Company went from paying for goods to simply taking them through taxation.
This was the ultimate monopoly.
Wealth without responsibility leads to tragedy.
Once the company controlled the taxes, they prioritized profit over human life.
They forced farmers to grow indigo and opium for export instead of rice for food. In 1770, a drought hit Bengal. Instead of providing relief, the company actually raised taxes to maintain their stock price in London. The result was the Great Bengal Famine, where an estimated 10 million people died.
While the streets were filled with tragedy,
The company's directors were reporting record profits to their shareholders. This is a chilling reminder for any business student. When a monopoly has no competition and no government oversight, the drive for profit can become a weapon of mass destruction.
Most people don't realize the East India Company was the hidden hand behind the American Revolution.
By 1773, the company was in a financial crisis due to corruption and the famine.
To save them, the British Parliament passed the Tea Act. This allowed the company to sell its massive surplus of tea to the American colonies tax-free, undercutting all local merchants. It was a corporate bailout.
The American colonists were furious at this unfair competition and corporate monopoly.
This led to the Boston Tea Party, where they threw the company's tea into the harbor. The war that followed birthed the United States, all because a private corporation in London had too much political influence. No empire lasts forever. By the mid-1800s, the company was bloated and corrupt. In 1857, their own private army, the Sepoys, rebelled in a massive uprising.
The company couldn't handle the chaos.
The British government finally stepped in, realized the company had become too big to fail and too dangerous to exist, and officially took over their territories. In 1874, the East India Company was dissolved. It didn't go bankrupt. It was liquidated by the state. The most powerful corporation in history was gone, leaving behind a map of the modern world. They left India with railways and a legal system, but they also left a legacy of exploitation that would take a century to heal. So, what is the lesson for the wealth vault? The East India Company proved that a corporation with enough information leverage and political influence can become more powerful than a king.
Today, we see shadows of the company in big tech and global logistics giants. They control the data, the modern tea, they influence the laws.
The blueprint hasn't changed, only the tools have. If you want to build a modern empire, you must understand that the real wealth isn't just in the product, it's in the system and the monopoly. Thank you for unlocking this file in the Wealth Vault. If you're ready to explore the rise of the Medici family in our next archive, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The vault is now closed. Until the next video.